And we're like pulling her out, and she stood up. We were just like,
Hello guys, welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with Michaela, who's currently still getting ready. And I'm here with Chris, who is in the same time zone as me, nearly, basically. I'm not the only one outside of the Eastern time zone. It's great. How are you guys doing? You alright? What's been going on?
Good. Yeah, I'm doing very good. Michaela's living up to her alter ego and getting ready for this show. I see, as always. How are you feeling, Michaela? Are you really chipper and really feeling good in this morning?
I'm feeling amazing, obviously. I didn't stay up till 4 a.m. last night celebrating my friend's birthday in the UP with all of the other drinkers in the bars. I'm feeling good.
Was that friend Chris by any chance? Because I hear it's his birthday. Which I knew as well.
I am 29 again, guys. It's awesome. I love it. It's great to be here. Yeah. Unlike, I generally hide my drinking problem, unlike you, Nick. So I don't have a beer in my hand, unlike you.
Although you have to be drinking the whole time.
Hold on. I'm in Germany, and there's always beer in Germany. So even people working beside me on projects have a beer ready. So.
That's great. That's great.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Chris.
Very good. Very good. And,
very good.
Yeah. So I don't have the empty wine bottle like you did, Nick, but still.
Mine wasn't empty at that point.
Yeah, well, it was by the end of the interview. Yeah.
So. This is true.
Anyways, I should. I'll also just in my never-ending quest to be in a different area for every single episode, apparently. I'm in Berlin.
The trend.
Now. That's why I'm in the same basic time zone as you, Nick. I'm over here for some work meetings with one of the NGOs I work with, Wilderness International. So I got a few days to have some fun with my friends, my birthday, and then off to meetings for about 2.5 weeks. So enjoying the cold. I mean, I know it sounds weird, but as a Canadian, I miss the cold. So it's actually nice that my toes are kind of chilly right now, and I'm keeping my hands warm. A nice little break from the jungle.
It's finally winter.
Whereas we're done with it, aren't we, Mika?
Yeah, you guys are done, and I get that.
So over the cold.
Canada, but, I'm enjoying this. So
very true.
Anyways,
yeah.
I guess enough of us are rambling because we have a really, really great guest again. I think we're actually killing it with the guest, guys. It's great.
Yeah, we really are.
And she's fantastic, and I don't think this will be the only episode with her in it, based on how good it is. So maybe you can just really quickly, briefly introduce her, Michaela, and we'll get right to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So really quick, we are going to be talking to Gael Sanchez. She is a wildlife biologist in Michigan, originally from New Mexico. And she's going to be just talking about her journey through wildlife and how amazing it is, and how also the raw reality of it as well. And so I'm just really excited to start, talking to her and get some information on, her entire journey. So, yeah, and she's a good friend of mine too. So, I'm really excited to have her on this podcast.
All right, well, let's go.
So today at Field Stories, we're welcoming Gael Sanchez, and Gail's a friend of mine who is a wildlife biologist in Michigan. She is originally from New Mexico and went to undergrad at NMSU, and then did her master's at Texas A&M in Kingsville, studying landscape genetics and mule deer and predicting the potential spread of chronic wasting disease, which is a really big issue right now, spreading across the United States. Gael also has an amazing page where she educates a lot of younger biologists on how to become a biologist, just the real reality of it. And Gail's honestly just an amazing person too, and really just a pioneer in this field as especially a woman in science. So I'm really excited to have her on today. Gael, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us about your background, and we can just go from there and get to know you a little more.
Yeah, I'll give you the rundown, a little bit of this field. So like you said, my name is Gail. My pronouns are she, her. And I am originally from New Mexico. I grew up in Albuquerque. I have a really big Hispanic family there. My dad's one of 9. I've got 21st cousins, so family all around. And my mom is from Australia, and she's one of 5. So I've got a whole other side of my family over there, and my sister and nephews and everyone's now live there. there. So growing up, I kind of
Amazing.
had a foot in, yeah, kind of like a foot in both countries. I've got dual citizenship. We'd spend every few summers over there, and just like living with the family and everything. So I've always kind of been a little bit all over. But I grew up primarily in New Mexico. I did go to New Mexico State University for undergraduate. Neither one of my parents are in this field. I now do have a cousin who's in it too, but that wasn't until later. So like coming into this field, I really like kind of had no idea how to get into it because I didn't know anybody in it, and that really is like it can be really hard at the beginning for a lot of people if you don't have somebody you know and you don't have connections and you don't have background. So going in, I had grown up watching nature shows with my dad on Sundays and was just like, the PBS nature shows, loved them, was obsessed. I was so into them. I was a like wolf kid, so I was like super into wolves. They're a lot of people's entry point. And so I always told my parents, like, I want to do what they do on there on the nature shows. And they were just like, okay, that's cool. And then I got to undergrad and I was like, no, I really do want to do that. And but I didn't know how to get into it. So I was like, oh, they're biologists, so I'll do a biology degree. And so I wanted to be away from home, but college is expensive, so I went to a nearby school just 3 hours down from home in Las Cruces. Turns out they have a great wildlife program, which was lucky for me. But I also went there because I ran for the cross country and track team, so I was a 3-sport athlete as well.
Yeah.
So I did indoor track, outdoor track, and cross country. So year-round practice, competition, traveling every weekend, very busy. I also worked in a lab for a bit, so lots going on. I like to be busy. But I started off in biology and was like, okay, cool, let's take some classes. And then I talked to my advisor, like the second year in, and he was asking me like, what do you want to do? And I was describing like being a wildlife biologist, and he said, we have a wildlife degree. I had no idea. I was like, oh, what? And he said, okay, well, take the intro class, take the wildlife management class, see what you think. If you like it, you can still switch majors. Took it. It was exactly what I wanted to be doing. I got to do the basic techniques of management and everything, and I was like, this. And so he was like, we have a newer degree called conservation ecology. It combines the rigors of the biology degree and with like the field aspects of wildlife. So I ended up doing that. So I went to undergrad in conservation ecology, and it was like the perfect intro because I ended up for one of my classes, they did some interviews with the Bureau of Land Management my second year in as a sophomore, and I got a internship with the Bureau of Land Management that summer, working in Albuquerque, and so it kind of like set me on the right path. And then from there, I worked in a lab for my advisor. They studied parakeets and communication in parakeets. So I did a lot of like data entry. So I was working for a PhD student doing data entry, super important, really good to learn, really fun. And then I worked the summer after my junior year for an REU internship. So that's research education for undergraduates through the National Science Foundation. I studied that summer pygmy rabbits in Idaho. So we were looking at temperature sensors for them. So I got to get more connections there. Some of my like long-term friends now in the field who I met there, like the PhD student I worked for at the time is now a professor, and with like really great connections through that. That summer I met my now husband. So he was working. Yeah, he was working as an intern there too, physics intern. So like you never know where internships are going to lead you. It's pretty amazing.
Honestly.
So yeah, finished up undergraduate, and then I spent a couple years bouncing around doing different internships. I worked first for the Department of Game and Fish in Idaho, doing wolf tracking and advising on trapping areas. And then I worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the Mexican Wolf Project in New Mexico and Arizona. That's a whole other story in and of itself. That internship, really great, also really terrible. But then
Yeah.
I then
There's
worked
always
in,
one.
oh my gosh, yes. I worked in Colorado after that, first doing captures on neonate mule deer and then doing captures on black bears around Durango. And after that, I worked in Georgia doing environmental education and outreach with a whole range of animals, but primarily with birds of prey. And after that, I did my master's at Texas A&M Kingsville, like you said, landscape genetics. So I was looking at mutations in the prion protein gene, which gives a partial resistance to chronic wasting disease, as well as landscape genetics, looking at the potential spread of the disease. Um, Really rewarding, really great. Glad I did my master's. Probably the hardest thing I've done in my career, though, to date.
Yep.
Very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Finished that. Yes, finally came up to, also let me know if I'm ranting because I know I'll just, but
No, you're great.
so yeah, went up to Michigan after that to finally be in the same place as my partner, now husband. 6 years distance, finally got to be in the same place. We do that a lot in our field. And then
Yep.
I finally in the same place, but then I was based in like a smaller area, had to find a job. That's really hard when you start limiting location, especially when you're new to the area. I didn't have any like connections yet. I worked a couple more tech positions. I worked as a technician on a chronic waste and disease check station, and then I worked for Oakland County Parks and Rec, leading a crew there. And then I finally got my like first long-term position working for the Bay Mills Indian community as a wildlife biologist in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Absolutely adored that. Loved it. Did it for the past 4 years or so, a little over 4 years. And but that involved a lot of travel because my husband was still based downstate, so I would travel up and down between upstate and downstate, which is a 5-hour drive one way. Had an apartment up there during the week, so in the off seasons I would be remote down here, but from like ice off to ice on, I would be traveling back and forth. So we ended up deciding it was time we wanted to have a kid. So I just recently in the summer gave birth to my daughter. So with that, it was, it's not really realistic to be doing the travel anymore. So I'm lucky enough that we do have a decent income from my husband, and I was able to take some time off. So it's been 6 months off with my daughter, and from here, I was talking to Michaela, it's hard to know exactly what comes next, and it's really nerve-wracking, but also exciting to be able to take that step back from my job for a moment, not really have a job waiting, but also knowing that I will have one. I'm confident, I have the experience, I have the background, I have the connections now that I don't feel as nervous about finding a job in the future. And I also know that it's not my entire life. So
yeah.
So there's my background.
Wow, what an epic
Incredible.
introduction. That was great. I think we just have a couple of questions. I'll kick us off. So I don't know if you know, I'm a student myself, and quite a lot of my friends and fellow students there listening to these podcasts, and I know they'll be thinking exactly the same thing as me, which is you've done so much in the last several years. What does the transition from being a student to the real world look like? Because I know a lot of students think, oh, as soon as I get my degree, I'm in the world, I've got a career lined up, and almost know for a fact that's not true. So if you could tell us about the transition between that period, I know there's a lot of people who'd be very interested.
Yes. For a lot of careers, that isn't. I've got a lot of people in my life are doing careers two of my siblings are engineers. One of them, he's in the army. Another one is an accountant. So for them, it's you finish your undergrad degree, you have a job waiting for you basically. Or you you go straight into a master's, and then you have people lined up to give you jobs. People just take our money, do a job. And for us, it is very different. It's a lot harder. Not gonna lie, this field is hard. But in some ways, it's also like it's exciting in other ways because you do have like a lot more potential adventure instead of just being like, cool, I have a job lined up in X state. It's,
Mm.
what am I going to do from here? For some people, it's, you finish undergrad and you're like, okay, I'm ready for grad school. You get a grad school position, you go in. For other people, it's very different. For me, I was burnt out. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been in school for my entire life. I would like to actually work for a while and like be free. And so like doing tech positions for a couple of years was exactly what I needed. And it got me a lot of the experience I needed to and gave me a bit of an advantage because then when it came time for like my master's and after I got out of my master's, I had a lot of experience, whereas other people who went straight through didn't have that. So it can be really nerve wracking and it's hard because there's like no one path. Whereas other jobs is like, this is where you go, this is what you do. And maybe there's two choices. But for us, it's like, there's a million ways you could go. You can go into like so many different kinds of things. You can go straight through to school. You can do more school. You can do academia. You can do government. You can do private. You can do tribal. You can do so many things. Consulting. And so it's hard to know
Daunting,
like where to go from there. It really is. It's daunting. It still is later on in your career. It can be, and
yeah,
it
of
can be
course.
hard to like figure out where do I fit. Yeah. And you might
Oh,
think
It's so
it,
tough.
yeah, it really is. And you also might have an idea of what you want to do, start doing something like that, and then realize, I don't want to do that at all. And like, that's really scary too, but it's also nice because in some fields, you've already started that and you're like solid in. And for our field, there's so much wiggle room to like change and to be like, I did this for 5 years, but I want to do something entirely different. And you do have
yeah,
more freedom. So I'd say don't stress too much if you don't know what you want to do yet. If you get out of school and still have no idea, if you go through grad school and still have no idea, or like try something out, yeah, try something out,
Right
be
here.
like, that was really fun. I'd love to do more of that, but I want to change it for a while, or I hated that. I want to do something totally different. Just be flexible and understand that like wherever you go with your career, you can still like find your place and you can still change it up and you can still we have more flexibility. So if you do one thing, it doesn't set you in that path. And it also doesn't mean that if you do something and hate it, that you've like messed up. Like, oh no, I worked with bats and now I hate it, but I'm like stuck here forever. You aren't. You can work with like plants. You can work with like sea marine animals. You can work with like reptiles. You can do. There's so many different overlapping skills in our field that are
transferable.
that you're able to. Yes, it's so much. There's so much flexibility. So like, there's a lot of us who are further in our career who like still are not entirely sure what they want to do or are still like open to change, and it's so fun. Like for me right now, I'm like, when I go back in, like Michaela's asking me like, well, what do you want to do next? What do you think is next? I'm like, let's see. That's exciting. It's also scary, but it's exciting. So,
I'm
I feel
just
like
thinking
that's a
Chris
really
is
common
reacting
thing
to that as
too.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
uh,
it's strange, and I mean, almost all my friends are, even my friends who've chosen to specialize in one taxonomic group are still finding their way in that group. So it's challenging. Um,
It is.
as Nick and Michaela know, I usually have a lot of questions and a lot of things to say. So I'll try
That's
to
good.
be quick. I actually have two questions, which are quite different, very different paths. But before I get to those, I want to build on Nick's question because I think it's such a great topic, and I agree, Nick. There's a lot of viewers, especially younger, but even older, who really do struggle with this and really like the advice from other people and the experiences. So I would say, Gail, I'm curious of your input. I mean, for me, I get the question a lot about like, what's the best piece of advice? And of course, it's super complicated. There's so many things you can tell people. And yeah, experience. We all know that's super important. But one thing I often tell them too that I think a lot of people maybe overlook, especially because a lot of people in this field are very, let's be honest, a lot of us are kind of on the spectrum. A lot of people are like really focused. And we're all like kind of weird, but in a great way. In a great way. I say that with love, and I know I'm super weird. I mean, that's why I'm friends with these two, right? So
Absolutely.
embracing the weirdness is part of being who we are, and just getting out, and that's awesome. But it also sometimes means some of us may not be super social, or maybe we're not really great at making connections. Some people are, some people aren't, or we're only good at it in the right context. And that's one thing that I always suggest to people is don't be fake, be who you are, because you got to love who you are, but also try to make connections and really use that a lot. So that's one of my biggest advice to people is networking, connections, leveraging social media if you can, these types of things. So aside from that,
So
Gail,
much.
I just wonder if there's something else, that you might offer up as advice to people that they might not think of in their normal life or in their work.
Yeah, I definitely, first off, totally agree with making connections. That is so very important. It's probably the most important thing in our field. Everybody thinks it's like, oh, get experience in coding, get experience in animal identification, and like networking can make a difference where nothing else can because it's kind of a lot about who you know, which can suck sometimes, could also be really helpful because like if you have the courage to be able to like reach out and make connections on social media or in a conference or in a workshop or something like that, that can really pay off in the future because it's like you never know who is going to make a difference. Like when I did my REU internship in undergraduate, I worked for a professor there, and when I went back like years later after my tech positions and applied for graduate school, she was on my resume as one of my contacts, and she ended up knowing my grad school advisor. They had had the same students in PhDs and grad school and stuff and masters, and so she ended up like that contact made a big difference for me later on because they were able to like my potential advisor called her up and was like, hey, you've had this student, and she gave a good reference, and that made a big difference for me. So like you never know where it's going to make a difference. It's such a small field. We all know each other. Everyone knows each other. You'll like mention someone and it's like, oh yeah, so and so, like, and it's like, oh yeah, like my friend worked for them years ago, or like my advisor knows them, or I've worked for them, or something like that, or I wrote a paper with them, or so yes, connections are great. Do it in the way that you're comfortable. There's so many ways to make connections now. Don't underestimate social media. Amazing. I've made so many friends, including Michaela on there. Like I've made so
Yeah.
many connections on there that are like so lasting, and like now I've got to like meet people in person, and it's incredible. But some people I still have never met, and I consider like really good friends. But I'd say in addition to that, one of the big things that I really harp on, which is going to just sound so disconnected, is like the importance of like being more than our jobs. And I know that that sounds out of left field for a lot of people, and it's something that I talk about a lot. So if you follow my social media, it might not be as much of a surprise, but at the same time, like I have really learned that over the years because if your job and your career is your entire identity, if something goes wrong in your career, or if you have a break, or if you have just a blip or anything, even really good stuff, but really complicated things. Like if something changes, a big change, or even like questioning what you're doing or anything like that, or, something goes in your personal life that takes over a lot of your time, you can feel like you lose your entire identity. And that can be really hard because, if our entire identity is, I'm a wildlife biologist, like say, you get sick and you have to take a break, or a family member is sick, or you have a kid, or like you lose funding in your position, or even just like something goes wrong in your study. Maybe you still have your job, but like something goes wrong. That can be really hard because all of a sudden you're questioning yourself and you're blaming yourself. And I'm to fault. Something's wrong with me. What did I do wrong? Or, oh no, I've lost this for a time. Or, oh, I can't get another job working with this thing that I'm super passionate about. What am I going to do now? And so you start questioning yourself, and you start like there's so much that it can be self-doubt, it can be really stressful and hard, and you start questioning so much more about you. And when it comes down to it, it truly is like something we are clearly all very passionate about, something we really love, but it is just a career and it is just a job. And while it's amazing and a huge part of us, it is not all of us. Every single one of us has something more than our careers. We have our families, we have our friends, we have our passions. Like, we've got our hobbies, we've got our pets, we've got our homes, we've got just so many more things about us that than our jobs themselves that do come into our jobs, but can also be very separate from our jobs. So by finding those things that are identifying factors and things that are important to us outside of our jobs, we're more complete people. It can help your jobs too by like finding things that you like to do in your free time other than your job. It makes you better at your job because then you can come back like refreshed instead of just constantly thinking about your job and worrying about it. You can finish for the day, finish for the weekend, finish for the season, and say, okay, now I'm going to do something else entirely. I'm going to like read a book. I'm going to hang out with my family. I'm going to do my hobby. I'm going to like play with my dogs, play with my kids, like, things like that. And then you can like feel so much more refreshed. You can feel so much more inspired and stronger in like yourself. So when you do your job itself, you're a better person and you aren't burnt out like in the same way that you would be. You can still, of course, experience that, but if you do have something happen in your job, you realize, okay, what are my solutions to this? Not, oh my gosh, I did this, something's wrong with me, I'm a terrible biologist. It's, something went wrong. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Let's look at the solution. Let's step forward with it. Let's figure out what we're gonna do. Let's fix this. Let's find, our next step. Let's take a break. Let's step back. Let's, like, for me right now, I'm taking parental leave. And while that's much more normal in a lot of countries outside of the US, in the US it's not. If I had stayed in my job, I would have gotten a max of like 12 weeks parental leave, and that's nothing. Your body is barely not even healed at that point, and let alone like your kid. And so, like for me, like I've got the Australian side of me where like my sister has taken, a good year, 18 months with each of her couple of kids, and that's so much more normalized. So for me, I'm taking that time with my kiddo. It's scary because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm stepping back from my career and my job. What's going to be there after? But at the same time, since I've built my identity outside of that, I still have connections to the field in other ways, like through the Wildlife Society and through my friends and colleagues and things like that. But also, I do have an identity outside of it. So I can still have other things I'm doing, still feel like myself, and still know that it's going to be there when I come back. So, I think that's such a big part of the advice that I try to give people. And it's scary at first because you're trying so hard to still establish your career, but so you never know like how these things outside of your career can actually influence it. Like maybe you figure out like, there's like for me doing like silversmithing, I'm like, oh my gosh, my art has wildlife in it too. And I make connections in that way. I've met wildlife artists and you can also like sometimes like find people who work in this field or work in totally different fields that end up being really positive for your career. So that is a long way of saying my advice is like, be more than your job and be okay with having an identity outside of it.
Okay.
Right.
Do you offer private counseling sessions on this subject?
We can all work through it together because
once a week when I'm going insane, living in the street. I think if I ever come to Michigan, we are gonna. I assume you drink. I shouldn't assume, but if you drink, biologists drink. Come on. So we can have a few drinks and talk about this subject because
Yes. Wow. Yeah, definitely drink much less now with the kiddo and had a long break, so a little bit gets me a long way now. But but definitely we'll do a counseling session together where I also remind myself, okay, you're more than your job.
Definitely gonna have a nice hangout in Michigan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Gail, that was awesome. Especially I think like for myself too, I definitely get stuck in that routine of like finding that this whole field is my identity. And so then, when you don't get that job or you're still stuck in technician positions, you start to really get down on yourself and you're like, what am I doing wrong? But you forget like about the whole other person, you know, before all of your career and before everything else. And so, you know, and I have so many questions for you, but I think one right now is, you know, piggybacking off of everything else is, you know, you got your master's and so did I, right? You know, and that was really tough. And then there's always that push of like, should you go for your PhD? Should, you know, like if someone who doesn't have their master's, should I go for my master's? Should I, you know, continue to get more experience? And obviously, you know, I love social media because that's how I made a lot of my connections and conferences. And that really has aided me along with my master's. But I guess for, you know, people who don't have those degrees yet, or, you know, are considering it, and what do you recommend for these people? You know, what is that advice for them? You know, do you think that a master's or a PhD is worth it? You know, even for myself, like I'm still debating right now if I want to do a PhD, and I'm at that point where I'm like, how much do I hate my life? Like, do I want to waste another 5 years? And Chris and I talked about a lot. Chris is like, go for it. I'm like, do I hate myself enough yet? I don't know. But you know, what you know, what's your, you know, advice for, you know, people who are in this situation? Because there's a lot of us.
Yeah, definitely. That's a complicated subject. And
It
they're
totally
like
is.
the same thing. And like what used to drive me mad with my advisor, is like there's no one answer to it. And he used to
I
always
know.
just be like, that's complicated, or oh, let's like look at the options, or like things like that with like every question in science. But um it's sort of the same thing where like there's no one path, and what's right for one person isn't right for everyone. I've known plenty of people who have gone straight from undergraduate into their full-time career. I've known people who have done tech positions for their entire career. I've known people who have gone straight through academia. I've known people who have done academia for like, you know, 10 years and then stepped outside and done industry jobs. And or people who have done tech positions or long-term jobs for a long stretch and then gone back for their master's or PhD. There's no one answer to it. Some of it is like, what opportunities do you have? And, you know, what steps can you take in your career? But also, you know, what is right for you? Like for me, you know, I've done my master's and I've done tech positions, and I'm the same way. I'm debating, would I want to go back for my PhD? Is that something that's right for my career at this point, at a future point? Is that something that is good for my career, but also like my mental health? And this is where like I get vulnerable. For me, grad school was really hard on my mental health. It was the
Oh,
first time that
same.
I really realized the depression and anxiety that I suffer from. And like up until that point, I could manage it really well for myself.
Hmm.
And well, really well is, you know, is pushing it, but it's something that I could
Yeah.
like manage with like exercise and ignoring it and things like that. But when I got to grad school, that's kind of what pushed me over the edge with realizing like I do need more. I needed like, you know, I needed counseling and a psychiatrist and medication. And I got to a point in
Yeah.
grad school where like I was at a breaking point and I was not functioning. I was not happy. I was not. And like, well, I'm so lucky that I had an amazing advisor and amazing friends and family that when I did hit that breaking point, I was able to like be honest and open with everyone and tell them I can't keep doing this at this point. I need something. And my advisor is really great about being like, get, you know, the help you need, take the time you
Yeah.
need, you know, get to that point where you're healthy again. And so I was able to get that help that I needed, get medication, get counseling, get stuff like that, and be able to
Yeah.
be a functioning person again. But for me, you know, that was really hard. And for a lot of people, there's a side of graduate school and academia that not everybody talks about, where it can be really
No.
hard on your mental health. Not saying that industry and positions outside of school and academia can't be, but it's its own beast where you are so much more responsible for what you're doing than in other jobs. You
A
know,
lot of
whether,
pressure.
yeah,
Yeah.
whether you finish
Full
or not is
self-awareness.
kind of, yeah, it's kind of up to you. And so it's like, you
Hmm.
know, am I going to go into the lab today is somewhat up to you, or am I going to even finish this degree is on
Yeah.
you. And so that can be
Hmm.
really, really, really stressful. And for me, it was a lot. You know, I am a pretty independent person, but at the same time, like I like some sort of direction. And my advisor was a good balance between giving me guidance, but letting me do my own thing. And so could be really hard at times. And it was really hard, being in a place where I was like away from friends and family and stuff. And it's just, it can be really stressful. And so that's something to consider if you are going into academia. Make sure that you have those resources that you need. Make sure that it's a good move for yourself. Don't feel guilty if you take a break and you take time, or even if you start graduate school, even if you start your master's or PhD or at academia and you choose to leave, even without finishing. I've known so many people that have been successful without finishing, and that's okay. Like, I've known people who have either left the field altogether, which is also a whole other subject, totally fine. They have amazing lives and careers in other places, or in the field or out of the field. And I know people who have started their masters or started their PhD and left. I know people who have like started their masters and left because of lack of funding, or left because of mental health, or started their PhD and then left with a master's and gotten jobs and are totally happy and successful and amazing in this field. So if if it's something you're considering, don't feel bad for where your career goes, and don't feel bad for taking a break or not being sure if you want to go back to academia, go into academia. It's a hard place to be. It's very competitive for a small number of positions. Ultimately, professorships are very competitive, and for a long time, they're not paid much, and they can be really hard to get. And a lot of it is connections too. So it's a complicated subject, and there's no one answer to it. And it's about considering.
Yeah, I think you answered it wonderfully, Gail. And and obviously we have so many more questions, and I think you answered all of them so beautifully. But we are at the point where we're going to transition into the field story, and we're excited to hear about yours. And our field stories range from crazy to something that's inspiring, or something that just was really moving for you. Whatever it is, we're really excited to hear about it, because everyone has, being biologists in the field, we all have some kind of story. So we're really excited to hear about yours, and just really happy to have you on here.
Yeah, definitely. I love your philosophy, your life philosophy. It's great.
I'm still developing it. Definitely still there. And I have so many moments where I'm like, what am I doing? But field story. I definitely have had a couple I'm debating. I've got sort of, tough times in the field, but also like funny and crazy. And I think like the one that I always tell people, because it's my crazy one, and that everybody's always like, oh my God, when I'm just like, when they're like, oh, what's your crazy field story? It's probably when I was working with bear captures in Colorado. So I was working for Colorado Parks and Rec, and we were like the bear capture team. This was after undergraduate, a couple years into being a tech. And so basically our job every day was like catch bears and put collars on females so we could track them around, look at what they were eating, comparing the use of natural food resources versus food resources within the city. So also looking at like bear-proof trash cans, and then looking at the survival of their cubs based on all of that. So then tracking them into their dens in the winter to look at cubs and survival and things like that. And then taking a whole bunch of scientific samples. But the bear captures included a lot of traps like in and around the city of Durango, Colorado. So some of them were straight up in people's backyards. Some of them were like out more in the wilderness. And, you catch a little bit of everything. You catch bears and skunks and raccoons and a blue jay one time that wrapped itself completely up in the fishing line that you use at the back of the thing. So like, getting a blue jay out of fishing line while it's just so angry at me. And, but you catch like a little bit of everything. Sometimes you're catching them and it's just like, it's just you and your crew. You have a lot of like quiet and calm for your captures. And we had some captures where we were catching them in like the middle of a neighborhood, and like the neighborhood would want to be there. Like we had one where like the HOA was like, okay, you can do captures here, but we want like all of our residents to be able to be present for it. So we had like 30 people there for this bear capture, and you're trying to control them, but and you're like, stay behind this line, but like, we're in the middle of the capture and we're like handling this bear, and there's like we did this thing where you would like look at the fat content of the bears. And so you put like needles in you clips on their lips and needles in their butt. And then you run a current between them to like look at the fat content. And so there's like needles in their rump and in their butt around their tail. And I'm in the middle of trying to do this. And this older guy decides he's just going to come up behind me and try to pet the bear, which it's asleep, but there's like, there's only like so much, make sure they're down. And there's like, his hand is just heading right for the needle. So I just like put my hand in the way. He just stabs my hand into the needle. And it's just like, and I was like, Esther, I'm gonna need you to like step back, which it was like, fine. Like it's a small needle, but it's so like that kind of stuff. There's just craziness. But I think like the craziest part of it was we had a capture where it was like sort of later in the evening. We had one trap that was like right by our bunkhouse, and so I'd left it until the very end of checking all of my traps because I'm like, oh, I'll head home. We haven't had anything in there. It'll be fine. Go to finally check it, and we do have a bear in there. And it's like a really big fat bear. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys, we have an uncolored bear in here. We need to work it up. So calling everybody, and by the time we get to it, it's like, it's dark. And so we have like our headlamps and we're working on it. So we would use a jab pole. And so we would use the drugs we used BAM, which is really great. It's like a whole combination drug that knocks them out really well, has a really smooth recovery, and love that one. It's more widely used now. It was one of the first testings of it back then on bears. And so it was great though, but it was like me and one of the like head technicians and another tech, and we were all and I was a tech at the time, and so we're doing the capture, and we needed to collar it because it was but we didn't know if it was like male or female yet, so we needed to anesthetize it and like put it under, pull it out. And so we looked at her. You kind of estimate the weight which can be so far off when they're in the trap. You can be like, oh, that bear looks like 100 pounds, and it can be like 300 or like 50. Yeah. And it's really hard to tell with bears at times. So with black bears. And so we get this, we end up getting this bear. We put her under. She's completely out. She's in this big cage trap. And so you check that they're out. You basically like make a lot of noise. So we're like banging on the trap, all of that. You're looking for like any reactions, especially like ear twitches, nose twitches, things like that. Nothing. She is out cold, like hard. And we're like, okay, perfect. So we open the cage, and you'll even sometimes like tap the feet, totally fine, totally out. So we're like, okay, cool. So we start so she's big, and a big fat bear near the end of the season. She's getting nice and chunky for winter. And we're like, oh my gosh, it's a female, so exciting, a new female to color. This is exactly what we're looking for. She's in such good condition. And so we start pulling her out. She's big and heavy, so it takes a couple of us like pulling her feet, and we're like pulling her out, and she stood up. We were just like, and both of us just dropped this bear and like step back, which was like the right reaction, but we were just like, oh my God, we drop her and step back, and she takes and she just like starts walking forward away from us, luckily, but she starts walking, and we're just like totally, and then just like falls over on her back, and it's just like out again, and we're like, oh wow. So like what we think happened is she was so fat that like the drug didn't properly metabolize in her system, and it was like affecting how it was metabolizing. But we ended up bumping her with a little bit more drug, and she was out fine then. We worked her up. We did everything. She was totally healthy. We reversed the drug at the end. She went off with the collar, all of that. It was great. But that was definitely like a terrifying moment, because it's as much experience as we have, and as much as like we sort of like know what to do in a lot of circumstances, that was just like, oh my God. And like we were telling my boss, the head biologist, later, and she was like, well, I'm really glad you guys had the reaction that you did to just drop the bear. And she's like, that happened to me one time, and I tackled the bear without thinking about it, and I rolled with it. And she's like, luckily it was out the same way, but like She's like, I'm glad you guys, your reaction was step back from the bear, give it its space. So like everything turned out fine, but it was definitely one of those moments where your adrenaline just like hits the roof and you're like, oh my
Yeah.
God. So that's kind of my like craziest field story.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. That was great. Wow.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's funny when you started when you were deciding what story to tell. I just in my mind I'm like probably something with bears, and when you said bears, like okay, yeah, no,
They're crazy animals.
I mean, I think I can speak for Michaela and Nick when I say we would probably have another 1 or 2 hours of talk and questions with you. And I feel like it's kind of like with Holly last week. I feel like would be a great guest to have on in the future if you're up for it.
Cool part.
Absolutely.
Of course, that'd be wonderful. I've got
2,
more
3,
stories
4.
to tell, so.
Yeah,
We're doing a whole 10-part series with you, Gail. That's what.
Advice column.
My questions even in there. I think they each one is like 10 minutes. So like I think we got lots of content in the future. So that was great.
Yeah, me only asked one as well. Oh man, so many.
Yeah, so I think we probably have to wrap it up here, but I think it definitely won't be the last time we chat because I mean,
No.
I would chat with you privately or in camera anytime. It was awesome. So
Definitely, I've had a wonderful time.
That was great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Gail. We learned so much, and I think a lot of our viewers would be really excited to listen to your advice and your calming voice and just, how inspiring you are. And, that's why I always love talking to Gail whenever I like have an issue, especially like just whatever in the field. I'm like, Gail, can you help me out? And you're great. You're so experienced and so wise, and I think we're definitely going to have you on again.
You're going to have all
I don't
of our
always feel like that, but...
Don't give the Instagram or anything out because you'll have everyone asking you advice.
I know.
Don't do it. Don't.
So everyone's gonna start messaging her.
That's why I created a whole guide because like everyone comes with like basic questions, and so I have like a basic guide that I'm just like, here's where to start.
So good.
Well, yeah, it was great. I mean, we don't have to wrap it up here. We'll be here forever, but that was awesome, and thank you so much. And I think we'll definitely have you on again. All right, well, that was, fantastic. As I said in the interview, we have to have her on again. And I know the three of us, we've already chatted about, like, we have so many questions. Like, honestly.
Yeah, so many.
Yeah.
Each one of you could. And I feel like we could, like, you joked to Nick about a 10-part series, but honestly.
It's not far off. Not far off reality,
no.
It's an incredibly complicated subject. So many people, you and me have talked about, well, actually, we've all talked even private conversations between each other. There's just so much to this career and this life that it's so all-encompassing, and it's a lot more complex than I think people who aren't in the field think it is. There's a lot of sacrifice involved, a lot of challenges.
Oh, 100%.
And it's a really, really, really complicated subject. So having her input's great, and I know there's a lot of different ways and angles we could take that in the future. So I'm really excited to have her on again in the future. It was fantastic.
Me too. And I really like that she touched on the subject of that every person has their own path in the field of wildlife. And, you can have a master's, but do so many technician positions. And I think the whole point is that, when you're done with school or wherever you are, it's not that you're going to always just land a job like a normal, you're an engineer or a doctor. And I think a lot of us all struggle with that when we talk to family members or friends who don't understand the position we're in. And so it's really good to have her really put in that advice and that input of like, hey, everyone's going to have their own path and that's okay. And it's sometimes going to be really hard and you're going to be, you're going to struggle. And, but it's really important to this is not your identity, but also, we're all going to have our own path and we're all going to, find our way eventually. It's just going to take some time, and that's good.
Well, I know for me as a current student, sorry, Chris. I was just going to say, like, as a current student, it's quite inspiring to see that you can go through all those trials and tribulations. And obviously, I'm not in the biology side of things as such, but in the sort of wanting to be with wildlife and working with it and be able to see the ups and downs.
Absolutely.
And then someone like Gail creating such a powerful path and having all this amazing advice, but she was in the same position as, say, I was and a few of my other friends who'll be watching this. We're all thinking, like, where can we go? what directions. I know for me, there's 1,000 different paths I could go down. Filmmaking, photography, like what species do I follow? Like conservationist, do I do like it's massively overwhelming. Do you have to? Sometimes you get told that you have to pick something and really follow that dream, but it doesn't. How do you really find out what you really want to do? And the fact that she's done so much different or so much variety of things shows that you can dabble a little bit here and there and just work out what you don't want, and that's almost as powerful as what for working out what you do want. And yeah, it's really motivating, I know, for myself, and really enjoying that. And these obviously the guests, as they continue bringing more of an overall story to the whole conservation topic, and really enjoying the guests at the moment.
Amazing. I mean, I guess we'll wrap it up in a minute. I'll just say one quick thing just to build on what she said. I think I didn't say it in the interview because it's just the time was going, but I think one of the challenges, just sort of wrap it up for this field as well, is that when you think of most fields, like I would say, to be honest, lawyer, accountant, she mentioned that, construction worker, whatever, which are great fields, very respected, awesome people, nothing wrong with that in any way. But most of those fields are fields where you judge your success largely by the money you make, but that's how you feel successful. You advance, and that comes with more money, and you generally take the opportunities that lead to more money, because that's what most fields are like. And I know I'm generalizing, but that's what most are. But our field is more of a passion-driven field, and most of us are not in it to make money. And that means that it's good because people say you're following your passion, and that's true. And that's certainly why I know I need to do this. I can't do anything else to be happy in my life. But it also means that you don't have that one singular goal. So you feel like you're always like, where's my passion? Where can I do the most good? What should I do? Do I stay here? Do I do there? A lot of people would just be like, I'm in job A, but job B pays me more, so I go there. And that's it. It's a simple choice, or a simpler choice. And I think in conservation, that makes it even more complicated. So I think it's a great topic and super important topic for so many
it's
people
really great.
Honestly struggling. And
we all had that question. We still do.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd say for anyone who's watching this, who's still going around, it's a long episode, but an important episode, is that, I really respect Gail for the fact that she's very, open about these topics on her social media. And hey, I'll be honest, I don't usually put these personal things out in social media because I just have chosen not to go down that route. But I have huge respect for people who do. And I would just say that for those people who are not putting it out there in the social media, almost every person is struggling with this to some degree. Yeah. So if you listening, as if you're
not alone.
Trust me, you are not alone. We are all in this boat together, and none of us should feel weaker or lesser because we're struggling. We all and that's why Gail said, I mentioned too, reaching out to people. If you're struggling, just reach out.
Yeah,
just talk to
100%.
Them. I mean, that's how you know each other, Michaela. So
absolutely. That's exactly why.
Reach out, talk, join this community and discuss it, and you'll realize you're not alone in the way you're.
Just don't spam Gail. She does that.
We're gonna put her Instagram link in our bio. It's Cactus Coal Collections. She does a lot of advice columns, but also she's a smith, so she does a lot of silver work, and it's all wildlife based too. So definitely check out her page. We'll put that on there. And I think that's a wrap for today.
100%. Yeah, great episode, guys. Nice.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, guys.
Thank you, guys. See you soon. Recover well, Michaela.
Make sure to like. Yeah, you guys. Thanks. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share, everyone. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.